MSI's GT76 Titan has some extremely powerful hardware inside, including 8-core i9-9900K overclockable CPU and Nvidia RTX 2080 graphics. So let's find out how well it performs in games at different resolutions and see how it compares with some other gaming laptops. For the specs, there's an 8-core 16-thread overclockable desktop i9-9900K CPU, 200-watt Nvidia RTX 2080 graphics, definitely no max Q here, and 32GB of memory and dual channel. You can find other configurations and updated prices linked in the description. Unfortunately, there's no option of disabling Optimus for better performance. We're stuck with it, so no G-Sync here. The MSI Dragon Center software allows us to set different performance profiles. With Turbo Mode, you have the option of setting all 8 CPU cores to 4.8, 4.9, or 5.0 GHz. I've done all testing here with a maximum of 4.9 set, as some games would crash at 5. It also allows us to overclock the graphics by 150 MHz on the core and 250 MHz on the memory. I've tested with these settings as I figure even someone that doesn't know what they're doing can easily apply these changes. And I've got Cooler Boost enabled, which basically sets the fan speed to maximum. We're only covering gaming performance here, so if you're new to the channel, you'll definitely want to get subscribed for the thermal testing and full review videos where I'll cover everything. We'll start off by going through all games at all setting levels at 1080p and 4K resolutions. Then afterwards, we'll see how the Titan compares with some other gaming laptops. 1440p wasn't tested as it wasn't a default resolution of the machine, and I couldn't easily add it as a custom resolution. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode. I've got RTX on shown by the green bars and RTX off shown by the purple bars. At 1080p, it was still quite playable even with RTX on at ultra settings, where I was able to average above 60 FPS. However, we could get much higher than this with RTX off. At 4K, it was still playable with RTX off, where almost 60 FPS averages were reached at ultra settings. However, RTX wasn't going so well, to the point where my frame recording software kept failing to record 1% low data. Control was tested by running through the start of the game. And again, I've tested both RTX on in green and RTX off in purple. RTX was playable at 1080p and it actually looks good in this game. We're just under 60 FPS with all settings maxed out. However, as you can see, much higher is possible with RTX off. At 4K, RTX is basically unusable, while low settings with it off played okay, again near 60 FPS. However, with medium and high presets at this resolution, there were noticeable issues due to the lower frame rates. Wolfenstein Youngblood was also tested playing through the start of the game. This one uses Vulkan, and the performance was nothing short of excellent at 1080p. I wasn't really seeing any noteworthy differences between the different setting levels at this resolution. There was hardly any change between minimum and maximum, so might as well just max it out so that everything looks its best. This is definitely a title that would benefit more from the 1080p 144Hz or even 240Hz screen option. At 4K, the results are honestly still excellent and much better than I was expecting. If you're using the 4K screen like I've got here, it's limited to 60Hz. And I was seeing above this for the 1% low even at maximum settings, so not only is it looking great, but it's playing perfectly smoothly while doing it. Ghost Recon Breakpoint was tested with the game's built-in benchmark tool, and as expected, due to the specs, these are some of the best results I've seen with this title so far. At 1080p, even ultimate settings was averaging well above 60 FPS. Granted, the 1% low was down quite a bit. Ultra looks much better in that regard. At 4K, the results are hit hard. However, 60 FPS was still possible with the very high setting preset, so still some fair results. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was also tested with the game's benchmark tool, and at 1080p, these are some of the best results I've ever seen from a gaming laptop, which I guess isn't that surprising given the hardware inside. But we'll see how this game and others compare with different laptops soon. At 4K, the results drop back quite a bit again, however medium settings was still capable of above 60 FPS averages, with high settings not too far behind. Fortnite was tested using the replay feature, and the results were a bit lower than I was expecting. However, this is my first time testing with these specs with the new Chapter 2 map, so it could just be a bit more resource intensive. In any case, there's absolutely no problems playing with max settings. At 4K, Epic settings was still quite usable with 60 FPS averages. However, we could more than double this just by dropping down to medium settings. PUBG was also tested using the replay feature, and again, great results here. I mean, I've got a 60Hz screen, and even the 1% lows at high settings are double this. So no issues here, and it would work great if you get it with a 1080p high refresh rate screen instead. At 4K, it was still possible to average above 60 FPS, which is a pretty impressive result, while low settings and below allowed for 100 FPS and above. Alright, last time I tested a crazy powerful machine, some people got upset that CSGO wasn't included, so here we go. At 1080p, the results are well above average due to our increased CPU power, and there's a nice improvement to 1% lows too. The averages at 4K aren't too bad, but the 1% lows drop quite a bit. However, I doubt many people would be looking to play at this resolution anyway. I only included it because I tested everything else at 4K too. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark. At 1080p, ultra settings was just below 200 FPS with relatively high 1% low performance too. So as expected, no issues here. Granted, the results at max settings weren't all that much above mid-range options. At 4K, ultra settings still had above 60 FPS even for the 1% low. So while lower comparatively to the 1080p results just covered, these are still good results considering the resolution and the 4K 60Hz screen. The Witcher 3 is fairly GPU heavy, so it was no surprise that the results here are close to many other RTX 2080 laptops I've tested. I don't think it needs a super high frame rate to play, so although ultra settings is a step back compared to the other setting levels, it was still playing perfectly fine. I thought 4K wasn't going too badly even at ultra settings. However, the high setting preset was needed if I wanted to average above 60 FPS in my testing. Borderlands 3 was tested with the game's built-in benchmark, and it must be one of the few times I've ever seen decent performance from the highest setting preset at 1080p. This wasn't the case at 4K. However, it was still possible to achieve above 60 FPS for the average with the medium setting preset at this resolution. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was tested with the game's benchmark tool, and as a test that's on the CPU heavy side, we're seeing great results thanks to the 9900K. With above 60 FPS averages from the ultra high preset. That may not sound like much, but that's a good result for a laptop. At 4K, the results drop back quite a bit and are honestly more in line with what we'd see from more mid-range laptops at 1080p, with the medium setting preset just shy of a 60 FPS average. Let's also take a look at how this config of the MSI GT76 Titan compares with other laptops. Use these results as a rough guide only, as they were tested at different times with different drivers. I've tested Battlefield 5 with ultra settings, and I've got the GT76 highlighted in red near similarly spec'd machines. In this test, it's taking the lead in terms of average frame rate, although it was only just ahead of the Asus mothership, but it's worth considering that costs a lot more too. The 1% low was lower though, and slightly behind the Alienware 51M. However, it's still higher than the average FPS from our 1660 Ti machines down the bottom, so an impressive result. Here are the results from Far Cry 5 with ultra settings and the built-in benchmark. This time the Titan was a little behind the other 2080 machines in average frame rate. However, the 1% low is right up there with the best result from the Asus mothership. So again, pretty crazy results compared to most others. These are the results of Shadow of the Tomb Raider with the built-in benchmark at highest settings. The Titan was in between the Alienware 51M and Asus mothership. Basically, all of these machines are on a completely different level compared to the others due to the high-end specs. As we've seen, MSI's GT76 Titan is offering serious levels of performance, which is to be expected. It's a thick machine with an overclocked 8-core desktop 9900K CPU and overclocked RTX 2080 graphics capable of running up to 200 watts. 1080p gaming was of course no problem at all. If you're using it primarily for gaming, you'd probably be better served by the 1080p 144Hz or even 240Hz option. With the 4K screen I've got here, 1440p would also likely be fine with these specs based on my experience with other laptops that have similar hardware. While native 4K was hit or miss depending on the game and setting level, but for the most part, I'd say these specs are 4K capable for a laptop. There are definitely some compromises to be made with a machine like this, mainly in terms of size, battery life, portability, and price. It's more of a desktop replacement that can still be moved rather than your regular gaming laptop. But we'll look into this in more detail in the upcoming full review video. I'll be testing thermal performance in the next detailed video, so if you're new to the channel, consider getting subscribed for that as well as for future tech videos like this one.